What is up, Pitcher List family? Welcome back to another episode of Hacks and Jacks. I'm your host, Brett Ford, here with senior analyst Scott Chu. We're talking bats on Pitcher List. We've got a lot of stuff to get through this week. Last week, we tackled the first 10 tiers of Scott's top 300 hitters list. We're back for tiers 11 through hopefully the end of the list. We'll take you through all those tiers, talk about some guys that might be worth a look down near, the midway point and below of the list. And we'll get to all that here in a little bit. Scott, how is your weekend? How are things going with your preseason draft prep and all that?
It's going good, right? Finally got this list out. It's public. It's out there. You can go find it on the site. It posted it to Reddit. It's everywhere you want to be. So nice getting that out of the way. Of course, 45 minutes after I post it, a bunch of news comes out about injuries, all the Hammate stuff, Anthony Santander, all those things. So I had to go and change it 45 minutes after publish. And then a couple times after due to trades and injuries and things like that. But it's, it's going, right? This thing lives and breathes. I kind of hate that terminology, live and breathing document, but I update it as things happen. And then there's big updates that will happen starting later this month and into March. I'll have like a bigger update, but for now, like there are guys that get moved around up and down. We should get to some of the guys who moved big. Well, really only one guy moved big upwards, but a couple guys moved big downwards. So we'll get to talk about that as we go.
Beautiful. And you talked about the injuries. Let's get to that injury news. Lots of guys that reported to camp for the first time showed up with nicks and bruises, some of them worse than others. And for those of you who haven't subscribed already, PL Pro and PL Plus users have a Discord channel dedicated to injury news in the MLB. So one of the perks of that subscription. So what's going on with hamate bones and why do they keep breaking? Corbin Carroll, broken hamate bone, out for the World Baseball Classic, questionable for opening day. Jackson Holliday, broken hamate bone. He's recovering, probably won't be ready for opening day. Francisco Lindor decided on getting hamate bone surgery. So those three guys all pretty much with the same injury. And it stinks because those are three guys that were up in the, or at least two of those three guys were tier 1, tier 2 potential, and Jackson Holliday was poised for a breakout as well.
Yeah, it's really tough. And it's been, I won't belabor the point. There's a ton of stuff out there on why this stuff happens. It has to do with bat knobs and just hitting is bad for the hamate bone. The hamate bone is sometimes called the appendix of the hand. It's not super useful. The thing just to talk about, and I know others have talked about this too, it's not just me. There's this old wives' tale that hamate bone injuries will sap your power all season long. This is simply not true. They've done published studies in medical journals about this. What they found was basically no real change before and after, right? And they used WAR and ISO as their kind of two stats about before the hamate and after the hamate. And so there are guys who do have long-term issues, right? Basically, if there are complications to their recovery, we know that can last a long, long time. We saw this with Mike Trout. We saw this with Joey Gallo. They can last like 2-3 months. This can really bother them if there are complications. There are very few complications to this. It's very, very rare. But if it does happen, that will linger on. But if there are no complications, these guys come back to being at least as good as they were, right? And again, the average, the one thing I have heard is they're like, oh, well, they didn't get better afterwards, so maybe that capped their potential. Maybe, but the average age for these injuries is usually like 28. Right. So like we know that 28, like guys, we used to say like, oh, players peak between 26 and 28. That's just not true. Power kind of peaks early on unless you make big changes, right? Unless you like unlock something in your swing or something like that. How hard you hit the ball, like your bat speed, we pretty much know that right away. And it doesn't really get better as you go. So for these younger guys, it shouldn't cap their potential or anything like that. The reason you don't see much of an improvement afterwards is because, again, if the average age is 28, that means at least half those guys are probably older than 28, and they're not going to really get better this way. So long story short, it stinks. Maybe it impacts them in April a little bit more, but that's not because of the Hammate injury as much as it is like needing, they had to take time off when they could have been working. So maybe a little bit slow to start, but none of these guys really moved much in my ranks, at least not right now. Now, if we find out there's complications, they can drop a big way. But for now, uh, assuming everything goes well, maybe they miss a week or two early in the season when games kind of get canceled anyway and they're spaced out. I'm not too worried about it.
So this isn't something that should trigger Gunnar Henderson owners. I know Henderson's injury was completely different, but he was one who missed spring training. He, came back and looked healthy, but just clearly was not. This isn't something that you're sharing that same kind of concern.
No, and with Gunnar Henderson specifically, he had also looked like that for the second half of the year before, right? So like missing spring training maybe did impact him, but he was still the same guy he was in the second half of the year before. So that's where the concern is for Gunnar Henderson. For these guys, again, if they start slow, everyone's going to look to, oh, it's the Hammate. Maybe, right? It's also probably just like still ramping up. But I'm not overly concerned. We actually talked Mookie Betts last year, missed a bunch of time in spring training and had lost all this weight. And there was all this concern. He actually hit 2 home runs in his second game, right? He actually started the season really hot. Then he slowed down a bunch. And it's hard to relate that to his missed spring training as much as it is. It could have been anything, right? These guys there's lots of variables that go in. Anytime you think it's a single thing, you're probably oversimplifying the matter.
Well, we'll move on to a couple other guys who are heading into spring training with injuries. Jordan Westburg is going to be eased into spring training. Reports of him recovering from a strained oblique. Anthony Santander out 5 to 6 months. He's getting labrum surgery. So the Blue Jays' big offseason signing last year has yet to play more than a quarter of a season in Toronto. And then Chris Bryant's going to begin the year on the 60-day IL. Another massive contract signed for the Rockies. I think he's played under 100 games in the however long he's been in Colorado. It's wild, his injury history. It just keeps growing.
Yeah, and Bryant wasn't in the top 300. He was never a threat to make the top 300, even if they came out and said he gained 20 pounds of muscle mass, which, by the way, 20 pounds, every time they say, oh, this guy gained 15, 20 pounds of muscle, it's only been like 4 months. Like, do you realize how ridiculous that is? Like, that would be steroids, right? You don't like, maybe you gained 15 pounds, but ain't no way that's all muscle. That it doesn't work like that unless you like had a muscle added to your body, right? Or like you got like a My Hero Academia quirk to like improve your muscle mass to some ridiculous. It doesn't work like that. With Chris Bryant, he's obviously out. Anthony Santander stayed on the list, but he's in the 290s, I think 280s now when he was in the top 150. He's someone that if you have unlimited IL spots, maybe you take a flyer at the end of your draft, but you're not paying that folding money for him at auction, right? $0 reserve round only. And if you don't have unlimited IL, he's off the board entirely. Jordan Westburg is the interesting one, not because I think he's going to miss any time or I'm worried about his outlook. It's that between him and Holiday, it might open a little bit of space at the very beginning of the season. If Jordan Westburg isn't ready to start right away or needs time off, if Jackson Holiday isn't ready to start right away and needs some time off, it opens the door for maybe Jeremiah Jackson, maybe like Kobe Mayo to get some at-bats early in the season. I don't think either one would stick around. Neither of them are as good as Holiday or Westburg, but there's a chance they get a little bit of playing time and they might be worth looking at for the first week or two of the season. They're both ranked. Well, Jeremiah Jackson isn't ranked. Kobe Mayo might, I think, be at the very, very back of the list, but just something to keep an eye on in case they do show something and the team finds a way to get them more at-bats.
The Orioles also acquired Blaze Alexander recently, so that's going to be one of the guys that fills those second base at bats. I don't know how much his acquisition indicates the seriousness of Holiday's injury or maybe Westburg's injury, but
and I bring up those guys because I think they are more interesting than Blaze Alexander by a fair bit. So if they show something in the spring and Blaze Alexander doesn't, which is very, very possible because despite Blaze Alexander getting a bunch of time for the Diamondbacks last season, he can't hit, right? Like he hit 230, slugged 383. Like it was by the end, it was like a very average WRC plus, but he struck out over 30% of the time. There's very minimal power here. there's really nothing to get all that excited about with Blaze Alexander. And it's not as though we're like waiting for him to untap everything. He was not like, this was not a highly regarded prospect or anything like that, right? He wasn't even his organization's top 15 by most accounts. So there's a chance that someone like Kobe Mayo could overtake him. But again, it requires some things to happen. But Kobe Mayo is theoretically interesting if he ever figures out how to hit a slider.
That's fair. And Jeremiah Jackson, not for nothing, Jeremiah Jackson was really good in his cup of coffee last year in September for the Orioles.
Yeah, not for nothing. Yeah, like it's not for nothing. He struck out quite a bit. He was hot there for like a couple of weeks. I'll give him that. I'm not sure the team really sees him as anything long term. I think his plate discipline is pretty not great. The strikeout rate was really what was scary. It was pretty good in the minors last season, especially in AAA, but it was pretty ugly in the bigs and really kind of started to increase again at the end of the season. So someone maybe to keep an eye on in those AL only leagues, but not anything deeper.
That's fair. We'll take a break. When we come back, we'll jump right into Scott's top 300 hitters list. We'll pick up where we left off last week, starting with tier 11. Welcome back to Hacks and Jacks. I'm Brett Ford. He's Scott Chu. We're talking Scott's top 300 hitters list on pitcher list. We covered the first 10 tiers in our last week's episode. This week, we'll start in tier 11. And that was pretty much the top 100 hitters last week, Scott. We started in tier 11 with 102 Munetaka Murakami, the new White Sox third baseman, signed over from the Japanese League. We have Luis Arias, Jacob Wilson, Ezekiel Tovar, Augustin Ramirez, Heliot Ramos, Spencer Torkelson, Jorge Polanco, Wilson Contreras, and Ozzy Albies in tier 11. And there's so much depth at first base again this year with Torkelson and Contreras all the way down here outside the top 100, and they're still good hitters.
Yeah, they absolutely are. So last year we found the depth after the draft, right? So after the draft happened, we were like, oh man, it got really deep because there was a bunch of guys off the wire that became available. And the thing with first base, again, there's none of these guys nearly have the upside of the top, like I'd say 5 to 7 ish, 8. So if you look at like the top 8 first basemen in no particular order, it would be like Vlad Jr., Kurtz, Alonso, Harper, Devers, Freddie Freeman, Matt Olson, Josh Naylor. Like those are obviously elite guys, but after that, they're still like, if you're in one of those 2 utility leagues, one of those guys is probably going to be a first baseman, right? Because there's just a bunch more after that, right? Like Wilson Contreras in there, who raised a bunch between my October and my my recent ranks, simply because I really overvalued him being a catcher, right? I was like, oh, he's not a catcher anymore. He's totally off my board. If he's going to get full-time at bats, he's still a very useful player, right? It's not the same as it was as a catcher, right? He'd be ranked much higher if he was catcher eligible, and that's never going to happen again. But he's still a very valuable hitter, and he's going to get a lot of volume. He's going to hit in the heart of the order for Boston. He's going to get RBI. It's all there. So, and Spencer Torkelson, as much as I'd love to say there's a breakout coming, probably not, right? But Spencer Torkelson can still be exactly what he was last year. Again, maybe there's more upside there. I don't want to say a dude who's only 26 has no more upside, but he did finish as a top 100 hitter last year, mostly due to his first half. He kind of fell off in the second half. He was very up and down then, but this is the second time in 3 seasons that he's hit 31 home runs. The power is there. The batting average was up to 240, which isn't great, but the walk rate was up. I think there's a lot to like about Spencer Torkelson as well. And I think he'll kind of get overlooked as this boring first baseman, but cool, right? I'm all about boring first baseman, right? The other first baseman in this tier is Luis Arias, and he did bump up just a little bit. He landed in a perfect situation for him, which is a team that really needed a leadoff guy because they were using Heliot Ramos for it like all year last year, who will probably actually benefit from moving down in the order and getting more RBI. He's not a great like OBP guy. He was a weird fit at the leadoff spot, but Luis Arias isn't. As long as he stays healthy, he should be able to hit for a high average again. I don't know how high, definitely a down year for him last year, but especially in those points leagues that penalize strikeouts, he's still Luis Arias. He's still very valuable, and he's going very late in drafts. I think that's going to start changing now that he's got a team. But if you're in Yahoo leagues where he's eligible at first and second, he's definitely someone to keep in mind. just remember he's kind of a one-trick pony. He won't get as many runs as you like think that he should. You would think a guy with his batting average should get way more runs scored, but his OBP actually isn't. His OBP is good, don't get me wrong, but it's not nearly as good as his average in that sense, right? Like the last 2 years, his OBP was 346 and 327, right? So like it's hard. He's probably not a 100 run scored guy. He's never actually gotten to 90 in his career. Part of that is missed time. Part of that is because he's kind of weird. But Luis Arias, someone who's probably getting undervalued because of how bad his last season was, but the skills are all still there. And it's not as though he's so old that he should start falling off. He's only, he'll be 29 early in the season. So he should be just fine.
Are there any special roster construction concerns you have featuring Arias, like especially putting him at first base or corner infield? You lose kind of the typical power that you have at that position when you put him there. Is there anything from a roster construction standpoint that you kind of have to factor in if you do put Arias in your first base slot?
Well, the thing about Arias, it's less like where it doesn't really matter where you get stats from, right? Like yes, a lot of your power does come from first baseman and third baseman and outfield, right? Those are your traditional power hitters, but it doesn't really matter where they come from. The thing about Arias to be aware of is he doesn't really have power. He doesn't have speed. He'll score slightly above average runs scored, and he has a really, really plus batting average. So you kind of have to think of him in a way like some of these rabbits, right? Like he's like a 1.5, like maybe two like let's call it two. He's like a 2 category guy. So he kind of fits with some of these others, like Spencer Torkelson's sort of a 2 category guy, right? He'll get you some home runs and he'll get you RBI, but he doesn't really do a lot in the rest of the areas, right? You have to think about him that way. It's just different than the usual 2 categories we see. Usually it's like home runs and RBI, or stolen bases and average, or stolen bases and runs scored, or but he's one of these like average and runs, which are, you either really need them or you don't. They are hard to find. Runs scored and batting average are hard to find late in drafts. That's where he's valuable. You also may not need them. So he's one of these guys that might fall, like a lot of other 2 category players, he might fall totally off your board based on your early build, right? Like you may already have that stuff and you just don't need it. And so he's not, if you already have a good batting average, he's not really going to provide you any value outside of a points league, right? That's where points leagues are different, because you don't have to worry about, I already have the best average, right? Like you're just trying to get the most points, period. So he's incredibly valuable in those formats, whereas in other formats, you're kind of like, meh, I don't need what he does. So I'm going to move on.
We'll move on also to tier 12. Tier 12 starts at number 112, Alejandro Kirk. Moves down to Giancarlo Stanton, Xavier Edwards, Kerry Carpenter, Yainer Diaz, Gleyber Torres, Adley Rutschman, Marcus Semien, Chandler Simpson, Sal Stewart, Dylan Cruz, Xander Bogaerts, Wilyer Abreu, and Brenton Doyle at 125 rounds out tier 12. We're starting to get into that range of guys where there's a lot of potential, but also some risk because they have playing time concerns. Guys like Giancarlo Stanton with his injury history, Sal Stewart and Chandler Simpson potentially blocked at their positions by their organization. Kerry Carpenter might only be a strong side of the platoon. I know you love him. He's fun. But
and injuries, right? He's got a bit of a double whammy for him. But no, that's where we are in the ranks now, right? We talked about how strong those first like 5 to 7 tiers are. They are unbelievably strong. There's a ton of guys that are like 5 categories, 4.5 category guys. Those don't exist anymore, right? We're outside the top 100 hitters. We're starting to run into guys who, again, like Arias, are like 1.5, 2 category guys, or maybe like that, maybe 3 or 4, but have injury concerns. Adley Rutschman, who really since July 1st, 2024, he's been bad. Right? Like he's played roughly a full season since then because he's had some injuries and stuff, and he's hit 209 and slugged 332 in all that time. Before the middle of 2024, he was great. And then after that, he's just been really, really disappointing. You have, Giancarlo Stanton, who would be ranked a lot lower if this was like a deep format, right? Like those NFBC style formats, because you need the playing time. But in a 12 teamer, it's like, I'll be able to replace outfield. Right? Like I can find other outfields while he's out. So Stanton plus replacement level outfield for a full season is definitely like a hit, like a worthwhile hitter. So, and then there's like, Xavier Edwards, who's sort of like Luis Arias a little bit, but instead it's more like average in speed instead of average in runs. You have Alejandro Kirk, who's, uh, you know, limited in power. He hit a career high with 15, and that's probably the ceiling. The floor is a lot lower than that, but he's like batting average and playing time as a catcher. Just again, a lot of two to three category guys. The one to talk about most might be, I mean, there's not much to say about Chandler Simpson. He's batting average and speed. That's it. If you don't need those things, do not take Chandler Simpson. No one is going to trade you for him. Don't be that guy who thinks, oh, it's a good value and maybe I can trade him later to someone who needs steals. You'll never get the return that you're looking for because you'll only have one audience, and it's someone who needs a lot of steals. And they're not going to want to give up everything in these other categories to get it. So don't never take someone because you think you can just trade him, at least in a redraft league for sure. Finally, Sal Stewart. Look, metrics and projections love what Sal Stewart can do in a full-time season. The Reds signing Eugenio Suarez, I guess, makes a little bit more of a threat. But I think for now, we're looking at saying, like, look, this dude could hit over 20 home runs in a full-time role. We think, there's plenty of chances for him to win this job because there's a lot of very average pieces on the Reds, especially in like the corners and outfield. So I think he can do it. He's worth a look later on, especially with that first and third base eligibility. Keep an eye on Sal Stewart on draft day. He definitely has more ups. Like he has quite a bit of upside for this stage of the draft. Him and I think the other big upside play here is Dylan Cruz, who could be like a bit of power, speed, bring a lot of things to the table. He's just been really ugly and injured a lot in the last two seasons, but there's still something there. He was once a very highly regarded prospect. Keep an eye on Dylan Cruz as well.
Yeah, it's interesting that Roster Resource currently has Sal Stewart as the Reds' projected starting first baseman, but looming also in camp for the Reds. I don't know if this is any real threat to Stewart, but the Reds have Christian Encarnacion Strand, of course, Christian Encarnacion Strand, who is on the 40-man, and then some interesting non-roster invitations sent out for the Reds. Nathaniel Lowe and Michael Toglia, both in Reds camp to begin spring training. I know
Toglia couldn't cut it in Colorado. And a player like him, if you can't get it done in Colorado, it means you can't get it done. Right? Like that's probably the reality there. The real threat, I think, for Sal Stewart is the guy who's projected to be a bench player. That's Spencer Steer, a guy who's played a lot for them the last two seasons. He's the real threat. I've never thought he finished as a top 125 hitter last year. He's very average most of the time, and then he'll have these weeks where he explodes. He's hit 20 home runs for 3 straight seasons with a low batting average the last 2. I don't love the skill set for Spencer Steer. And a lot of the value, like the fact he even finishes in the top 25 is mostly pure volume, right? Getting over 650 plate appearances for 2 seasons, and last season still getting 568. He's a very volume, but he didn't do anything special. He just has a ton of volume. He doesn't run like he did in 2024. The Reds as a whole don't run nearly as much under Terry Francona. That's something that has come up a lot in a lot of conversations this spring with, between Ellie De La Cruz not getting, like, he's not going to get 70 steals again because Francona just doesn't run that much. They were insanely aggressive before Francona, and now they're just kind of like middle-ish aggressive. They run a bit more just because they have a lot of guys who can do it, but he's not super aggressive on the base pads. And manager is one of the biggest things when it comes to stolen bases because managers are the ones that give the sign, right? Doesn't matter if you're fast if you don't get the sign. So I think Sal Stewart's the big threat. Sal Stewart's biggest threat is Spencer Steer, SS and SS. But Sal Stewart's the one who has all the upside. If Spencer Steer wins the job, fine. He's a back end, maybe back end of the top 150 because of volume. But what's more likely is either Sal Stewart wins it all or Spencer Steer fights with him and gets like random playing time there and at other positions. And neither of them plays quite enough to be a top 150 player. That's sort of like the big negative scenario. They're not platoon mates though. They're both right-handed.
That's the nice part is you don't have to worry about kind of a left-handed bat creeping in there to platoon with Stewart. So unless of course Lowe or Toglia explodes in spring training, which is highly unlikely.
Nah.
Um,
Nah.
let's move on to tier 13, where we begin at, as I scroll to my spot that I left. Perfect. Tier 13 starts at 126 with Alec Boehm, moves down to Ryan O'Hearn, Gabriel Moreno, Mike Trout, Otto Lopez, Bryson Stott, Luis Garcia Jr., Caleb Durbin, Kazuma Akamoto, Royce Lewis, Dalen Lyle, Noelvi Marte, and that wraps tier 13 from hitters number 126 to 137. And there's kind of some underrated, boring players in this tier. When you look at Alec Boehm, Ryan O'Hearn, Otto Lopez, and then there's some guys who are really exciting, or at least have been in the past, like Mike Trout.
Yeah. So first, I think a big thing about this tier, you read off a couple third basemen. That's Alec Boehm, Caleb Durbin, Kazuma Okamoto, Royce Lewis, Noelvi Marte. If you missed, we talked a lot in the last episode about got to get one of these third basemen. If you didn't, this is the next time to strike, right? Wait. And then take a look at some of these guys, especially, Alec Boehm. You must have been reading Nate's notes. He talks about Alec Boehm being maybe underrated as a boring contributor at third. He can hit for average. He should have an okay spot in this lineup. He's not going to hit fourth like he used to, but he might even be able to crack the top 100. He's a very high floor, low ceiling guy, but that's not a bad play if you miss the top end of third base. And then, like Caleb Durbin, he's a line drive kind of slap hitter. He was in the bottom. I have to update this blurb. He was in the bottom third of the Brewers order. Now he's going to be in the bottom third of the Red Sox order. Nothing really changes for Durbin, although his batting average might come up just a little bit by smacking some balls off the wall that would have been fly ball outs. So, he doesn't have a lot of OBP, but he could do like 10 to 15 home runs, steal 15 to 20 bases, have an okay batting average. So he's decent, but again, high floor. I think Kazuma Okamoto is less talked about. We didn't talk about him much before. Munetaka Murakami for the White Sox. He's like this high ceiling, super low floor third baseman who gets ranked a little higher because if he figures out his strikeout issues, he could be like a big contributor. Okamoto doesn't really have that ceiling. His ceiling is really just kind of a top 120-ish, top 100 to 120-ish hitter, but his floor is a lot higher. I don't see Okamoto with full-time at bats falling out of the top 150 either. I think he's going to be here. So he's another like sort of safe and boring as opposed to like Royce Lewis, where it's like, the drill. Those are actually the first words of his blurb. The drill. Royce Lewis has shown that he can be really explosive, right? In his final 38 games, he had a pace of 33 home runs and 46 steals over full season. You don't want to extrapolate that too much. Just saying he can be a really explosive player, but he's hurt all the time. So the problem with Royce Lewis is you can't really take him unless you already have a third baseman, or you're going to kind of like double dip, right? You're going to take Royce Lewis and Okamoto, right? You're going to take Royce Lewis and Alec Boehm. And then that way, if the Royce Lewis thing doesn't pan out, you at least have some floor to kind of plug in because the replacement level is going to be garbage, right? So you got to have another one, but he's still kind of interesting. So yeah, I think another name, sort of like Luis Arias light, Dalen Lyle. So Dalen Lyle getting a little bit of hype. He was a top 40 hitter in the second half last year because he just smacked line drives everywhere. He's got a really aggressive approach, a really flat swing, not quite as flat as like a Vlad Guerrero Jr., but it's a really, really flat swing. There's not like a bunch of power that's going to come out here. Like, yes, he slugged 498 on doubles, right? Like it's a lot of doubles. It's a lot of running. It's a lot of speed, but there's enough there that he should have a good opportunity. Again, Washington doesn't really have a lot of other hitters that can do what he does. This offense isn't that good, but he could become a Luis Arias-like player with a little bit more power and speed.
Circling back to Durbin, now that he's in Boston, this trade made recently. It's interesting that Roster Resource has him projected to start at second base for the Red Sox, where they have Marcelo Meyer as the third baseman for the Red Sox. Is there any concern for Durbin's playing time with, the combination of Meyer and maybe Christian Campbell coming back up if he ever develops?
If that was a risk, I would think they wouldn't have traded for Caleb Durbin, who they don't really need. Right? Like they had other guys that could do this. Isaiah Kiner-Falefa is on this roster. He could have filled in if you were waiting for Christian Campbell. Rami Gonzalez could have filled in if you were waiting for Christian Campbell, right? Like you had options. You did not have to go and get a Caleb Durbin, but you did anyway, right? That's kind of the thing that stands out to me. So I'm very nervous about really being looking forward to Christian Campbell, who I think they're probably going to try to move to the outfield, which isn't very good for him because the outfield's already very crowded with guys that they have. So, yeah, I'm not worried. I think Caleb Durbin's going to play. He's going to play second. If Marcelo Meyer doesn't work out, maybe they'll put Durbin at third, and then they bring up Campbell to play second. But they traded for Durbin because he's going to play.
We'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk tier 14, 15, and beyond after this. Welcome back to Hacks and Jacks. I'm Brett Ford here with Scott Chu. We're dissecting Scott's top 300 hitters list. We're all the way down to tier 14, where Austin Hayes leads us off at 138. We move down to 139, Carlos Correa, Colton Cowser, Brendan Donovan, Matt McClain, Jordan Beck, Isaac Paredes, Willie Castro, Chase Mydroth, Samuel Basayo, Jake Berger, JT Realmuto, and 150 rounds us up with Kyle Manzardo. Lot of names in here that play second base, which is kind of interesting. This is kind of the second base depth tier, headlined by my guy, Willie Castro.
Yeah. So you actually notice the last several tiers have had a bunch of second base in them. And that's kind of the theme for this position. Very limited star power at second base, but tons of dudes who you could just take, right? And I'm really not opposed to just being, especially in like a 12-team league where you don't need a middle infield, just being the last guy to take a second baseman. I don't think you lose a lot playing that strategy, right? Like if another value kind of just like falls in your lap, sure, right? Like if you're getting a great value on like a Jorge Polanco and he's not quite the last one, like go for it. That's fine. But so many guys that are just like sort of there, right? I think the mistake to make with second base is to talk yourself into one of these guys being a huge sleeper. Like I think there's going to be people that are like, oh man, Brendan Donovan, now he's going to be leading off for Seattle now in Yahoo leagues. He's eligible at second and short and outfield. This is a dude, right? This could be a big deal. I was asked if Brendan Donovan moves up in the ranks going from leading off for the Cardinals and leading off for the Mariners. And you would think, yes, oh yeah, he'll score more runs. The answer was no, because my concern with Brendan Donovan isn't about that. It's about him being healthy, right? It's about him playing. Doesn't matter how good your team is if you don't play for them, So Brendan Donovan has injury problems. So don't fall in love with these second basemen that are late. Just take the last one, right? Which very well may be Willie Castro, but don't fall in love with Willie Castro. Don't spend, as I said, don't spend your folding money, your paper money, your real American dollars on a Willie Castro. Scoop him at the end for nothing, right? That's the value. That's why he should be fun to you. Like, ooh, Willie Castro, because I paid nothing, not because I hand over my hard-earned auction dollars or draft capital, right? Don't do that. That's silly. But it's okay if you're like, yeah, I got him for nothing. Right. He was just my last pick and he moved into a starting slot and then I'll spend all season looking at the wire to see if something breaks out. Right. Cool. That's it. That's what to be excited about. Right. At second base. It's that you don't have to pay anything to get one that's not that much worse than the people who paid for one 5 rounds ago. Right. You're probably not losing any value there. So that's what you do at second base. But don't fall in love here. The one guy in this part of the ranks that I think all of us are really rooting for something to happen is Isaac freaking Paredes, who does not deserve to be a bench bat. This is a good hitter, a legitimately good hitter. He would start for many teams. He just doesn't start for this one. because, as Carlos Correa, they asked Carlos Correa, are you worried about competition? He was kind of like, you can only start 4 infielders, right? And the downside for Paredes, he doesn't play defense very well at any of them, right? So hopefully he finds, I was hoping he'd go to like Pittsburgh, who still could use him, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen. But someone should find a way, because his power plays in every park, because no one is that far to the pole, right? Like nobody has like a 380-foot distance down the left field line, right? That's not a thing. So Paredes can play everywhere. If he gets a team, he moves up these rankings in a big way. If he finds somewhere to start, or Correa gets hurt or something like that, he moves up like 40 spots easy with a starting job. He's down here because he doesn't have one, right? So he's definitely someone I'll be looking to pounce on in drafts for sure. But, the rest of these guys, it's, there's several with injury issues. There's several with severe performance issues like, Jordan Beck or Jake Berger. I think every time I look at this, I do feel like maybe I have Kyle Manzardo too low. I think he's the one who first base could be, is fairly deep. I wouldn't be shocked if by the next time I update this, Kyle Manzardo is up a tier, right? Especially, even though he's going to platoon some, he can't get all the way up to like a Spencer Torkelson because he doesn't get the volume. But I wouldn't be shocked if I move him up a tier and keep him closer to like a Bohm or an O'Hearn. But for now, I've got him down here simply because he doesn't play as much as those other guys, and he is fairly streaky. Somehow he also only scored 43 runs last year. He had 27 home runs with 43 runs scored. Like that his home runs were over half of his runs. Like 43 is ridiculously low. Like that hurts you real bad to have a guy who only scores 43 runs. So it's a weird thing that kind of killed his value. It's got to be a fluke, but it's also the Guardians. They don't score very many runs. If he wasn't driving in Jose Ramirez, who hits his own home runs, who was he driving in? Stephen Kwan? That was it. And Jose Ramirez probably already drove him in. So yeah, it was a weird. And then who drives in the biggest thing? Who drives in Kyle Manzardo? Right? Who's going to do that? Who's behind? Can anyone even name the other guys? Like Chase DeLauder? Is that how many times is he going to drive in Kyle Manzardo? Who are the other guys in this lineup?
Daniel
Brian
Schumann.
Rocchio?
Do not disrespect Schumann.
I did. I'm sorry that I did, but I did. All right, that happened. Because who's going to do it? That's the only, again, 43 is way too low. It's got to be more than that. But how is it over 60? How does he get in 60 times? Even though he gets on base a ton, right? How does he get in 60 times? There's no one else to do it.
He ain't running.
How do the Guardians keep doing this? How do they get away with this?
Well,
they keep making the playoffs playing boring baseball. It drives me nuts.
Well, maybe this year the White Sox will actually present some sort of challenge. They did acquire Austin Hayes, and giving Austin Hayes full-time at bats might mean something for his fantasy production. I think it's interesting. At least this could be Oriole homerism. The former Oriole Austin Hayes was good in the second half last year for Cincinnati. And I mean, with full-time at bats, maybe he could be something here.
First of all, I deeply disrespect that transition. The White Sox, maybe they'll do something. Get out of here with that. White Sox aren't going to do anything. But Austin Hayes might. Austin Hayes, he's gotten platooned a lot. He got platooned a lot with the Reds. He got platooned a bit with the Orioles. But there's no one to do that for the White Sox, and that's what makes it a really good landing spot for him. Jared Kelenic is technically a White Sox. You might not know that. I did not rank him. But he's there. He's just not going to do anything. Tristan Peters, you've probably never heard of. I hadn't really heard of him. None of those, they probably can't even make the roster, much less platoon with Austin Hayes. So he'll get to play a lot. He'll get a lot of plate appearances. I think he could be a top 100 hitter coming in. But again, he's still very limited by this very aggressive approach that tends to lead to a ton of bad contact, where the strikeout rate isn't high, but he hits into a lot of outs, a lot of easy outs, because he's swinging at pitches that he shouldn't. So it can make him very, very streaky. That's why he's a little lower on the list. And the White Sox are not known for helping guys with this, right? Like Eloy Jimenez did not get better as a hitter with the White Sox. Luis Robert did not get better as a hitter with the White Sox. I can't think of a single hitter who went to the South Side and got better, right? They had guys. What?
Frank Thomas.
Yeah, that like then, right? But in this part of the new, like in the new millennium, guys have not gotten better after they go to the White Sox, which makes it a bit of a challenge. He's likely just going to keep leaning into what he already is, right? Which is fine. It just makes him very streaky for Austin Hayes.
Like that's literally the most recent bat that I can think of. Like other guys in Chicago, Paul Konerko was always in Chicago, so it's not like he went to Chicago to get better.
Yoan
Jermaine
Moncada,
Dye, like
yeah, exactly. They've not helped players become more disciplined, right? It actually worked out for like Miguel Vargas, who needed to become more aggressive because that's all this team does.
that's fair. Miguel Vargas is actually a bat that I'm a little bit excited about this year, just because I like the player, not necessarily because I like the outlook, just because I like watching him play.
Yeah. But the White Sox, generally speaking, their hitting philosophy appears to be: have you tried swinging more? Like, have you thought about swinging more? I've heard you can't hit the ball unless you swing, so swing more, which has its place as advice, right? Miguel Vargas needed to hear that, but Austin Hayes absolutely does not, right? Like Luis Robert absolutely did not. Those were not the problem. And that seems to be the only advice they give.
Speaking of former White Sox, look who leads off tier 15. It's a guy who benefited from leaving Chicago. Milwaukee first baseman Andrew Vaughn. He's at 151. We moved down to 152. It's Francisco Alvarez, Lars Nootbaar, Max Muncy, Spencer Horwitz, Jung-Hoo Lee, Addison Barger, Adolis Garcia, Gavin Sheets, Colt Keith, and Nolan Shanuel at 161 rounds up tier 15. Scott, looking through this tier, there's a lot of could be impact bats, like a lot of guys that are at least interesting names to me, especially really looking at the power of, Andrew Vaughn, Max Muncy, Addison Barger, Adolis Garcia maybe has a renaissance now that he's in Philly. What are your thoughts on tier 15 as a whole?
So I do think Nate makes a good point with Andrew Vaughn, and it's worth mentioning because it's exactly what I talked about before. If you look at Andrew Vaughn, what happens when he leaves Chicago? So in Chicago, his walk rate, at that time through 48 games, 3.6%, strikeout 22.3%. So again, only trying to put balls in play. Goes to Milwaukee. What happens? His walk rate triples basically to 9.4%, the highest he would have had in any season previously. He never had a full season with close to that. He still hasn't, but it was up to 9.4. His strikeout rate, what's it do? It drops all the way down to 14.6%. And 254 plate appearances is a very significant sample size for plate discipline, right? Usually around 50, we consider significant in some way. 250, obviously 5 times larger. So what happens when he leaves? He gets way better plate discipline. And yes, he fades off pretty hard at the end of the season and into the postseason, right? But even in the postseason where he only hit 154, he walked more than he struck out. Like he walked twice as much as he struck out, actually. So like these plate discipline gains are very real, and they come from leaving the stupid White Sox, right? Who only just swing more. And he has good enough contact ability to put those balls in play, but that's a problem because they weren't good pitches to hit. So by being more patient, I think we have the chance to see a much better Vaughn, right? I do think he'll platoon some because he's a boring old right-handed hitter, and they, against tough righties, they'll likely bring in a lefty. But there's certainly an opportunity here with Rhys Hoskins gone. He's someone that could take the next level and be a decent back end first baseman. I don't think he has the ceiling of like a Manzardo or a Torkelson or anything like that, even though we kind of hoped he would back when he first debuted in 2021. But he's a decent hitter, and he could be an even better hitter now that he's not with the stupid White Sox. I'm like, that actually is the title of this episode. The White Sox are dumb. But it's because they don't help hitters get better. They jerked this guy around for 5 years. He gets to Milwaukee, and all of a sudden you're like, hey, you're actually not a bad hitter, bud. Like, you don't have to get worse every year, right? You don't have to do that.
Does that make you that much more excited for Luis Robert in New York?
As I've said before, we don't know what's going to happen with him because he's got a lot of things. He's got injury concerns. He's got explosive talent. I certainly think someone can help him have better plate discipline than the White Sox did. because the White Sox are so bad at it.
Well, we'll see how he does. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll scoot through the remaining tiers of the list after this. Welcome back to Hacks and Jacks. I'm your host, Brett Ford. He's Scott Chu. We're talking through Scott's top 300 hitters list, and we're all the way down to tier 16. And Scott, we've got a lot of guys in this tier. Ranges from 162 J.P. Crawford, Cedric Mullins, Jason Dominguez, T.J. Friedel, Miguel Vargas, Jeff McNeil, Tommy Edman, Marcelo Zuna, now with the Pirates, Sal Frelick, Jake Mangum, Spencer Steer, and number 173, Mason Wynn. And one of the things I noticed about this tier immediately was how many speed options were in this tier. Which one of these guys are you most interested? Or are you interested in any of them for their speed? And which one's going to take away from other categories the least?
So I'm very interested, oddly, in Cedric Mullins. So I definitely think he can steal 20 bases, right? And I think the Rays will likely platoon him at times, but that may help Mullins out a little bit. I think when he is in the lineup, he'll hit near the top of it because the Rays just don't have a lot of other options for that. I think he can hit 15 to 17 home runs over there, steal 20 bags in a daily league, especially. Mullins could be very, very useful. And I think he's going to get overlooked a lot because he's old, right? And on a team that people will know about the platoon. I think while he used to show more speed, Friedel is someone that's kind of interesting. Health is a problem, but the ratio should be pretty good. He should score some runs for the Reds. And even though, again, we mentioned that Tito Francona doesn't run that much on the base pads, Friedel's going to get to play and he's going to lead off a ton and he's going to be in a great park. Now, injuries have been a problem. He's been very ineffective at times, but he could be a very nice, like late outfielder if you kind of forgot to fill those spots earlier in the draft or you just want like a stable presence because you took some risks out there, like you scooped Lewis Robert Jr. or something like that, and you're like, I should really have someone just in case someone gets hurt or it doesn't work out. I think TJ Friedel is a nice little fit there. But you know, yeah, Jake Mangum certainly has some speed. I think he could steal 35 bags and hit for a really good average. He's a 2 category guy. In a points league, Mangum's top 150 for sure because he doesn't strike out. He puts a ton of balls in play. Just remember, he's not going to hit like any home runs because Pittsburgh is the worst place to hit home runs. It is incredibly hard to hit home runs there. And that's what makes non-speed guy Marcelo Zuna such a weird fit. First of all, I would have rather they just got Andrew McCutchen because at least Andrew McCutchen is cool, right? I would have much rather that Uncle Larry be there and be cool than Marcelo Zuna, who might be good. Look, if you think all of the issues for Marcelo Zuna last year were injuries, not that he was, not that he's going to be 35, not that, he's just kind of a streak, power hitters can have the bottom just fall out. None of that. If you think it was all injury, then he's a great value on draft day. He's only DH eligible, so you can't really have him if you took Otani and you're in a 1 UT league, but whatever, right? He had a couple moments in like May and August where he looked good, but it never really stuck around. The other reason it's a weird fit is like team wise for the Pirates, like O'Hearn now has to play the outfield. He's a really good defensive first baseman, and he's like not that good of an outfielder, but they kind of have to move him around, even though Marcel's not going to play first, he's going to DH. It's weird things they do. I guess to show Paul Skeens that they're interested in competing, which I mean, I guess Marcelo Ozuna says that. I don't know. But Ozuna, look, you've got to bring the power projections down because Pittsburgh is really, really hard to hit home runs in. So of all, they have StatCast park factors where he was in Atlanta is pretty decent, right? It was ranked 10th. It was a 104 park factor. That means slightly above average for home runs. And it was actually very good for it was pretty much a plus in terms of overall park factor, what to expect on like hard hit balls. Like you got more hard hit balls there and all these things. The Pirates stadium is really good for doubles because it's really hard to hit home runs there. And you can absolutely rope a ball and have it hit the wall or something and stay in. It's the worst park in the league for home runs. It's one of the worst parks in the league for triples. Not that Marcelo Ozuna was going to hit any of those, but it really kind of caps his ceiling even more than being 35 and coming off a bad season with injury. Because even though his WRC plus for Ozuna was good last season, the overall production was not that of a top 150 hitter, even though he did play most of the season. And he took a big step back in just about everything, right? Compared to the 2 seasons prior, everything was worse across the board, right? Max EVs, average exit velocities, barrel rates, um, hard hit rates, everything, right, was all down by quite a lot. So I'm not super excited here, but there is a narrative, right? That if you think it was injury related, that's what it was. It was this core injury. Core injuries are known to just kill your power, they can linger a long time. There is a plausible narrative there. If you believe that narrative, Marcelo Ozuna is a huge value and you should get him. If you don't buy that narrative, I'm not sure you'll ever end up drafting him.
Well, let's move on down to tier 17. And this tier is one of my favorites to just look at and kind of gush over because of how many prospects are in it, how many shiny new toys we have in this tier. It starts with number 174, Josh Young. Move down to number 175, Ernie Clement, Brandon Marsh, Matt Wallner, Pittsburgh outfield prospect Connor Griffin, Brooks Lee, Jose Caballero, Kyle Teal, Austin Wells, Anthony Volpe, Nolan Gorman, shortstop prospect for the Cardinals, JJ Weatherholt, Jack Caglione, Jack Caglianone, Josh Lowe, Chase DeLauder, Joey Ortiz, Dylan Beavers, Jared Triolo, Mark Vientos, Jesus Sanchez, Mickey Moniak, Seattle shortstop prospect Colt Emerson, Detroit second base prospect Kevin McGonigal, and Josh Bell at 197. So a lot of dudes that just a lot of dudes in general, but some really exciting prospects here when you talk about McGonigal, um, Weatherholt, and Griffin.
Yeah, and like I like Connor Griffin. Like I really do. I think he's obviously a really really exciting prospect. It's insane to me that he's being drafted in the month of February or drafted overall and even just in the I think it's just in the month of February. Let me double check this. Okay, so in February, Connor Griffin, oh my god. Connor Griffin is going as hitter 115 off the board in in February drafts and NFBC. And I love Connor Griffin. That's insane. All right. That's ludicrous. But I like him. And it feels like I hate him. If you just look and say, I can't believe you rank him 178, ADPs 118. Why do you hate him? I don't hate him. 178 to me felt aggressive because we have no idea when he's going to come up. He's only got 98 plate appearances in double A. And we've seen players, like we see very few players with like less than 100 plate appearances in double A come up to the bigs and just star, right? That's hard to do. I mean, you can do it maybe with no triple A, but very few double A. Gosh, that's hard. That's such a big jump. So I'm probably taking the under on 100 games played for Connor Griffin, but when he's up, obviously all the eyes are going to be on him. He's clear number one prospect in baseball right now. I think Weatherholt, I agree with Nate and Nate's notes that Weatherholt, he has a real chance to be the starting second baseman. If it looks like he's going to win that job, he'll actually probably break the top 150 because that's playing time, baby. That matters. We've also seen him in AAA. We saw him hit very well in AAA, and he could be a 2020 player right out the gate. So those guys are interesting, right? I think a guy in this tier who is also interesting, who actually moved up very late. Actually, as I was doing some injury changes, I decided that Jack Caglianone was ranked far too low because he's got a ton of power upside still. Yes, he was very bad when he played last season, 232 plate appearances, but he avoided strikeouts. The problem was ground balls. You can't hit home runs when they bounce, right? Even if you're that strong, those are ground rule doubles, not homers. So Caglianone, if he can get the ball in the air, which is easier said than done, a lot of players struggle with this. If he can do it, then he could shoot up these ranks and land in the top 150 as well. I think he's very exciting in terms of a power prospect. And what's weird about this tier too is you're mixing these guys who are like, there's like these big upside plays like Griffin and Weatherholt and Caglianone. And then there's these very boring volume guys like Joey Ortiz, right? Like Mickey Moniak, like Brandon Marsh, right? The- Brandon Marsh is only 28 years old. Maybe it's just because he looks like he's from Duck Dynasty, but I thought he was like 35, right? Like Brandon Marsh was only 28 years old.
It doesn't
I
help that he and Jason Worth are like the same human. Like
Yeah,
just we
just
just
blended
assume.
together. Um, but he's like this sort of boring volume guy. There's like a little bit of upside there at times, but he just can't hit lefties. In his career, it's a 38.4% strikeout rate and a 61 WRC plus against lefties for Brandon Marsh. So as much as they say he's going to be a full-time player, you watch him for a couple at bats against lefties and you're like, maybe we should find someone else, right? Maybe we plug someone else in when the lefties are here. So, but he's a volume guy. Matt Wallner is someone that it's really easy to fall in love with Matt Wallner when you watch him hit like a 450-foot bomb, right? And then take a bunch of walks. And then you remember he goes 0 for 20 with 15 strikeouts in a week or something like that. And you're like, oh, yeah, he's Matt Wallner. He just really struggles with contact. He knows when to swing, but that doesn't help as much as you think it does when you can't connect. So, yeah, this tier is a weird mix of ceiling and floor. But again, there are values to be had. These are guys that are going to be like very last pick in a standard 12 team leagues. If you draft them at all, they're like very last pick. Last guy to talk about in this tier is probably Jesus Sanchez. So Jesus Sanchez gets traded to Toronto. There's a bit of an opportunity there, you would think, with Santander getting hurt. The problem is that Jesus Sanchez, who has like the upside to hit like 15 home runs, steal 15 bases in a platoon, and maybe be 2020 without one. The problem is that he hits a bunch of ground balls, right? The ratios aren't very good, in large part because of those ground balls. And the Blue Jays already have 3 starting left-handed outfielders with Varsho, Barger, and Lukes. They don't really need Jesus Sanchez, right? He doesn't. It's very strange to see a lefty not have a place to platoon in an outfield, anywhere in an outfield, especially when none of these outfielders are stars, right? Between Varsho, Barger, and Lukes. Now, injuries could help Jesus Sanchez get more time. Ineffectiveness could help him get more time. I think he's the most, I think he's more interesting long term than like Nathan Lukes, but he doesn't play as good a defense as Varsho. He's not like young and interesting like Barger. He's just kind of a guy, right? So it was really strange. This was yet another like one of these really strange fits for Jesus Sanchez. So he falls like well outside the top 150. He was much more interesting in Houston, but if he gets a full-time role, there is definitely some upside here.
One of the guys in this tier that I was a little bit excited about last year coming into the season, and then he got hurt, and then he was never heard from again, is Guardians outfielder Chase DeLauter. Um, a lot of pop in the bat. I don't know if that's enough reason to take a flyer on him late in drafts, but what are your thoughts on DeLauter?
Yeah, I mean, there's potentially 20 home runs here this season. Even he hit a lot of grounders when he played, so that was a little bit something to keep an eye on. Though, as you mentioned, the sample is low because of all those injuries, and maybe the injuries were the problem. There's a chance, though, because the Guardians, as we mentioned, are boring and bad at offense outside of Jose Ramirez and then to a lesser extent, Kyle Manzardo and Stephen Kwan. He could hit like 5th every day for the Guardians, like right out the gate. Right. So Chase DeLauter is someone that, again, as like a last round flyer, I kind of like Chase DeLauter. Just don't fall too in love. Don't be like, I'm counting on Chase DeLauter in a 12-team league. You don't want to do that. But he did make his MLB debut last season. It just was in the playoffs, which means the sample's wickedly low, but he didn't strike out much in those 2 games. Again, we're talking about 2 games. He had 1 walk and 1 strikeout in 7 plate appearances, but he did play for 2 games, and I think he's going to get a shot. I think he didn't start against Tarek Skubal because that's just cruel to have a guy's debut be in the playoffs and facing Tarek Skubal when you're a lefty. That's just, you can't do that to a kid. Just kill your confidence. But DeLauter, certainly one of the more upside guys here who also has opportunity, right? Because like Kevin McGonigal and Cole Emerson have way more upside than Chase DeLauter in terms of like just overall talent, right? Emerson is one of these guys that doesn't have like a single standout tool, but he's well-rounded. He could do a lot of plus things. He might be growing into some more power, but he's lost his opportunity with Brendan Donovan in the mix. Kevin McGonigal doesn't have an obvious starting spot. It looks like the Tigers are going to start with the veterans, McKinstry and Veerling and all this other stuff. But he was amazing in the Arizona Fall League. McGonigal was. He's got 20 upside, 20 home run upside right out the gate, especially if he can pull some fly balls, which he doesn't always do in the minors, but it's something that you could start to learn. That's actually where Isaac Paredes learned it. He learned it in the minors with the Tigers, and the Rays noticed and bought into it and did it more. Don't give the Rays all the credit there. He was already starting to do this when he got sent down from the majors to AAA for the Tigers. And they were like, well, why don't you just try doing this? And then the Rays were like, no, do this all the time. This is not a fun project. This is you now. Right. So that's where the change happens. But so Kevin McGonigal could do that. Emerson McGonigal guys are in a standard 12 or just watch list. But if there start being rumblings, right? If McKinstry or Veerling get hurt, or there's they're really starting off slow, McGonigal is definitely got a shot to get in that lineup and probably play like third base or something, or maybe he plays second and they move some other guys around. It's hard to say. The big opening is at shortstop for the Tigers, but I'm not sure they'll move McGonigal there.
Yeah, that'd be a big ask for a prospect in his first year making his debut. And obviously McGonigal, somebody to keep an eye on. Do you think out of all these prospects, who has the clearest path to everyday playing time and volume?
So even though Connor Griffin is definitely the best prospect of these guys, a tier of his own, right? In terms of prospects, he's clear tier one of one. He's the guy. If someone gun to my head said, who's going to be the rookie of the year this year? JJ Weatherholt, I think, is the guy. He's got the clearest opportunity in St. Louis because they suck and they have no one else, right? And Weatherholt is a legit, well-rounded prospect, right? Who can hit power, speed. He could really be, I don't know if he certainly doesn't have the ceiling of like a Connor Griffin, but the floor is real nice and high for JJ Weatherholt. And I think he could be a real difference maker. If I was going to draft in a standard 12-team league, the two prospects that I think should be drafted in standard 12-team leagues are Griffin for the upside and Weatherholt because I think he might be starting from day one. And while they're all in the same tier, you can kind of see them split where Weatherholt and Connor Griffin are towards the top of the tier and guys like McGonigal and Emerson are towards the bottom. Because I think by the end of the season, we might kind of see like when they're all together, like playing, if they were all going to be playing at the same time, it'd be a little bit closer. But yeah, so I think Weatherholt is the one who is not getting nearly the helium of Griffin, but could provide back quite a bit more value this season.
I can get on board with that. That'd be a guy that's circled on my draft sheet, certainly. Weatherholt at shortstop. One other guy, because I'm an Orioles fan and I can't resist at least bringing up this name. Dylan Beavers is a name that I'm interested in the deepest of leagues. Somebody at least to circle on my waiver wire. I know that you aren't a fan of his approach and his 227 batting average in the majors last year in 130 at bats wasn't great, but I really do like the way that this kid hits. I like his plate discipline. And I think he's got a ceiling for like 2020 with a 260 average if everything goes right for him in Baltimore.
Yeah, I have him for 12 and like 12 to 15 and 12 to 15 with a bad, but not horrible batting average. He can hit like 250, I think, and a much better OBP. I think he'd move up in OBP leagues. The biggest thing for him was as much as I like the overall approach, he is sort of the bizarro version of teammate Jordan Westberg, and that Westberg is extremely aggressive early in the count. That's how he avoids strikeouts. Dylan Beavers started behind in the count in 57.7 of his plate appearances, right? You can't start from behind that often. 50 is a lot. Like 50, you can kind of get like 50, almost 60%. You're down 0-1, right? You're cutting the legs out from under you. So he's got to find a way to force pitchers to be more honest early in the count. Cause what I kind of saw, I didn't scout him a ton, but what I did kind of see was like balls that were not, they were good pitches to hit. And it felt like he was letting them go because it was first pitch. Like he had decided in the batting circle like on deck, being like, I'm letting the first one go. And it just kills me when I see that because like that in the minors, that works awesome because those guys can't throw strikes all the time. Major leaguers will throw strike. It felt like anytime someone threw him a breaking ball for like as the first pitch, he was like, nah, I'll wait. And like, cool, dude. But everyone in this league can throw breaking balls for strikes. In the minors, they cannot. In the majors, they can. So you've got to find a way to protect yourself just a little bit. You don't have to be Jordan Westberg and just swing at everything early. But he's got to find if he can find some of that. The reason I say 12 and 12 is because I still project a platoon in the Orioles outfield with Dylan Beavers, and I think they're going to do a lot of mixing and matching. But he's got more upside than like a Tyler O'Neill. I think he can be certainly better. Like I think he's better than Colton Cowser. So I think Beavers could be the most exciting, young outfielder that they've got. Between him and Cowser, I think he could definitely move there. If Adley Rutschman is bad, we could see Beavers hitting like fifth against certain pitchers. So right behind Westberg and Henderson and Alonso, there's a real opportunity there. But first he has to not fall behind constantly.
Yeah, that's fair criticism. And as that's just me being a homer. You know what I mean? I think that I'm excited about their season this year after they went out and spent some money and acquired Alonso, and they're doing things that hopefully will fulfill the expectations that they've had the past couple of years. We'll see.
It's an offense with upside, right? They definitely have upside. I think they could be pretty intimidating, especially for righties, because the back half of that lineup is a bunch of lefties with power, with Beavers and Cowser and Basayo. Those are scary hitters, and you already had to get through Gunnar Henderson, right? So if you're a righty, you've got a lot of things to worry about, which I didn't really feel like they had last season. So and there's more power in this lineup. They could be, obviously they're not the Yankees or the Blue Jays, but I don't think the gap between them and the Red Sox is that large, especially compared to last season.
Yeah. I agree with you. And I'll tell you that the one signing that was not on my radar that it looks like nothing right now, but could be impactful, at least from a stolen bases standpoint, is Leody Taveras for the Orioles. That's a depth bat that just interesting, not necessarily good, just interesting.
Long-time leadoff guy for the Rangers. What's crazy is he's only 27. He made his debut in 2020. He's long been this sort of like put the ball in play. He had a couple seasons where the batting average was better, but it's really kind of fallen off the last few seasons. He doesn't hit the ball terribly hard, but his problem is that he hits a lot of fly balls and he doesn't hit the ball hard. So you'll hear me say, this is a good opportunity to explain this. You'll hear me say a lot of times, I need this guy to hit the ball in the air. I need this guy to hit the ball in the air. That's because they have power. They have real power, right? Vlad Guerrero needs to hit the ball in the air. He can't because of his swing plane. So it's hard for him to do that. And so it becomes very streaky. But like, I want him to hit the ball in the air because when he hits the ball in the air, it might leave. If you don't have that kind of power, I don't want you to hit the ball in the air that often, right? Leody Taveras should not be hitting half his balls in play in the air because they won't leave, right? And a fly ball that doesn't leave the yard is an out. Like almost every time. You've got to hit it in the perfect spot for that not to be an out, right? You need to like bounce it off a wall. You need to drop it like all the way down the gap, right? Or like flare it just in the right spot.
The old duck snort.
Yeah, the old three guys converge and it falls between them. It is really hard to get a regular hit that isn't a home run with a fly ball. So you don't want guys with limited power to hit fly balls. And he continues to hit more and more of them every season. You want him to hit things liners and on the ground because he can beat that out, right? He was probably only going to get a single or maybe a double anyway. And you can get those just as easily with a grounder as you can with a fly ball, right? Obviously, we'd love it if he hit more line drives, but that's really hard. So I think part of that for Taveras was because he was swinging outside the zone a lot. I haven't looked at the charts recently, but my guess is pitchers started beating him up. When you chase up, you tend to fly out. Even if it's either an infield fly or you just fly out in general. So I'm guessing that's probably kind of what's happening with him. So if he were though to get full, if somehow, right, things go so bad in Baltimore that Leody Taveras is a full-time hitter. I mean, as recently as 2024, he had 12 home runs and 23 stolen bases. Yeah, he only hit 229, but that's a semi-valuable player there. He just has to keep the ball out of the air.
Well, sorry for hijacking the podcast and turning it into an Orioles Orioles themed podcast there for the last 10 minutes, but it's been fun to talk about with Leody Taveras way beyond replacement level, and that's where we'll get on our next episode when we talk about the final 4 or 5 tiers of Scott's top 300 hitters list. Scott, let's talk about we'll talk about that next time. Tell the people where to find your work over on Pitcher List.
So, hey, the top 300 is out there. I'm updating it sort of as we go. In fact, I'm updating it right now because I need to change something about a player, but it's out there. You should check it. If you are a PL Pro, I also give access to a spreadsheet version so you can see it, and I update that in sort of live time too. So I hope you go and check that out. So yeah, that's really the big thing. That's all I'm really going to be having. It's going to big updates are going to start coming maybe in like 2 weeks or so. But for now, I'm making small updates based on trades and injury reports that are going to keep piling in. So keep an eye on that. And then as we get closer to the season, we'll start having that Reddit AMA, and we'll start getting ready for the hitter list that comes out every week. Beautiful.
You can find me at Fade That Man on social media. I'm in the Pitcher List Discord pretty frequently, and also recording a weekly podcast with Jay Felicio on QB List. So you can catch me over there as well. That'll be going on periodically throughout the spring and summer. We'll see how I fit it in. Obviously, Hacks and Jacks during baseball season is going to be my primary, but we'll see. Thanks for tuning in to Hacks and Jacks. For Scott Chu, I'm Brett Ford. We'll catch you next week for another episode.